You keep wondering why people overlook you, why they interrupt, ignore, or treat you like a placeholder. But here's the truth you don't want to hear. They're only mirroring how you treat yourself. Carl Jung said, "What you resist not only persists, but will grow in size." And the thing most people resist? Looking in the mirror and realizing they become their own worst enemy. Self-respect isn't some feel-good slogan. It's the boundary between being used and being valued, between being tolerated and being unforgettable. And until you claim that boundary, until you respect yourself first, no one else will. Because deep down, people treat you how you silently teach them to. And if you don't fix that script, you'll keep living a life written by fear, not authority. Stay with this video. This isn't about ego. It's about survival. You've been lied to. Modern culture has warped the meaning of self-respect into something dirty, something selfish, arrogant, inflated. They tell you that respecting yourself is ego, that putting your needs first is narcissism, that having boundaries is being difficult. But Carl Jung saw through that illusion. He understood that the line between ego and integrity isn't drawn by society, it's drawn by your soul. And here's the brutal truth most people never face. If you don't respect yourself, you'll spend your life begging others to. That's not humility. That's emotional poverty. That's the death of your spirit in real time. Because when you don't hold yourself to a standard, the world won't either. People don't rise to meet your potential. They sink to match your permission. You teach others how to treat you by what you tolerate. Every time you let someone walk over you, talk over you, guilt you, or shame you, you confirm their power and cancel your own. And worst of all, you start believing they're right. This isn't just emotional, it's psychological. Deep in the unconscious, your mind begins rewriting your identity based on the respect you fail to demand. Over time, your self-image fractures. You become a collection of compromises, smiling when you're hurting, agreeing when you're breaking, staying silent when your soul is screaming. That isn't maturity. That's spiritual self-abandonment. This isn't about becoming more liked. It's about becoming more real. Jung said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But that privilege comes at cost. And the price is this. You will lose people when you start respecting yourself. Why? Because they were never respecting you. They were benefiting from your lack of self-respect, from your silence, your fear. You need to please. They liked the version of you who made them comfortable. But self-respect doesn't care about comfort. It cares about truth. It exposes every false dynamic in your life. The fake friendships, the manipulative family members, the partners who only loved you as long as you stayed small. And when you finally say no, when you finally walk away, when you finally stand tall without flinching, they call you selfish. That's how you know you're on the right path. Because ego screams to be liked. But integrity is willing to be hated if it means staying whole. This is where most people break. They confuse self-sacrifice with virtue. They confuse people-pleasing with kindness. But pleasing everyone isn't kindness, it's control. It's fear dressed up as generosity. It's the desperate hope that if you're nice enough, they won't leave you. But here's the dark truth Jung would want you to hear. If you need to be mistreated to keep someone close, you're not in a relationship. You're in a prison, and you're the one guarding the door. Self-respect is the key that unlocks that cell. But you can't pick it up until you're willing to be alone. That's the test. Can you walk through life knowing you're not for everyone and being okay with that? Because until you pass that test, you will keep watering deserts and wondering why nothing grows. You'll keep shrinking to fit into spaces that were never meant for you. So no, self-respect is not ego. Ego demands attention. Self-respect demands alignment. Ego plays roles. Self-respect speaks truth. Ego reacts. Self-respect responds. When you operate from ego, you manipulate to protect yourself. When you operate from integrity, you refuse to betray yourself. There's a difference, and that difference changes everything. Most people live fragmented, split between the version of themselves they show the world and the one screaming quietly inside. They're terrified to speak up, to take up space, to say this isn't okay, because they think it'll make them bad, mean, dramatic. But the real tragedy is not speaking your truth. The real tragedy is waking up one day, realizing you've abandoned yourself to earn love that was never real to begin with. And if you think that's dramatic, ask yourself this. Why are you more comfortable betraying yourself than disappointing others? Who taught you that? Who taught you that your needs are selfish? That your emotions are too much? That you only deserve love if you keep the peace, smile politely, and ask for nothing? Who convinced you that self-respect was a luxury and not a necessity? Because here's the truth, you were never too much. They were just too unwilling to meet you where you actually are. You can't keep blaming the world for disrespecting you if you won't even stand up for yourself. That's where it starts. Not with a big speech, not with drama, not with revenge, with one small decision. I will no longer abandon myself to keep others comfortable. From that moment forward, your life begins to rearrange itself. Slowly at first, then violently. You will lose people, you will scare people, you will trigger people, but you will finally respect yourself. And when you do, you'll stop chasing love and start becoming it. Self-respect creates a new gravitational field around you. You no longer need to demand attention. You command it silently. Your energy shifts. People can feel the boundary even if you never say a word. And those who can't rise to meet it, they fall away. Let them, because you weren't meant to shrink. You were meant to stand, and standing doesn't always look strong. Sometimes it looks like walking away from everything you once begged for. But when you choose integrity over approval, when you stop performing, stop apologizing, stop dimming your light just to be tolerated, you ignite something rare. You become untouchable, not because you're guarded, but because you're grounded. Not because you have walls, but because you have worth. So let them misunderstand you. Let them gossip. Let them call you selfish. Because while they keep spinning in circles trying to earn respect from the outside, you'll have already built it from within. And what you build from within, no one can take from you. Not rejection, not abandonment, not failure. Because once you respect yourself, you're no longer controlled by anything that doesn't. And that is power. Let's be brutally honest. Being nice is killing you. Not because kindness is wrong, but because the version of nice most people live by isn't rooted in love. It's rooted in fear. It's not real kindness. It's self-erasure disguised as virtue. It's saying yes when you mean no. It's smiling when you're angry. It's apologizing for having boundaries. It's becoming whatever people want, so you won't be rejected. But here's the dark truth. Every time you choose to be nice instead of real, you pay for it with your identity. You shrink, you bend, you swallow your voice. And on the surface, people applaud you. They call you so sweet, easy to work with, such a good person. But deep down, you're disappearing. Carl Jung warned us, what you repress doesn't vanish. It waits. It builds in the shadow. And the more nice you pretend to be, the more resentful, bitter, and exhausted you quietly become. You start smiling with dead eyes. You help people you secretly hate. You agree with things that violate your core. That isn't kindness. That's self-betrayal. And betrayal has a cost. Not just emotionally, but psychologically. Over time, the nice person becomes a mask you can't take off. You forget what you actually think, what you actually feel, what you even want. Because your nervous system has been trained to prioritize others so much, it sees your own truth as a threat. That this is where nice people begin to break. Not loudly, not publicly, quietly. They start to feel invisible, underappreciated, resentful, used. And here's the worst part, they blame themselves. They say, maybe I need to give even more. Maybe I'm not enough yet. Maybe if I just keep being nice, someone will finally care. But that's the trap. People don't love you for being nice. They love you for being honest. And if your kindness is based on fear of conflict, rejection, or abandonment, it's not kindness. It's survival, that it's people-pleasing. And it's not noble. It's manipulative. Hard to hear, isn't it? But here's why that matters. People-pleasing isn't about generosity. It's about control. It's the unconscious belief that if you shape-shift enough, give enough, sacrifice enough, you can make people love you, stay with you, or treat you right. That it's emotional manipulation with a smile. And most people never question it because it works. At first, you get approval, you get validation, you get temporary belonging. But long-term, you get resentment, exhaustion, collapse. Because the people you attract through self-sacrifice are the very people who expect you to keep sacrificing. The moment you set a boundary, they act shocked, offended, betrayed. They say, you've changed. But what they really mean is, you stop performing for me. You stop letting me use you. And that's when the illusion shatters. You realize it was never love. It was dependency. It was exploitation wrapped in politeness. And all your niceness, it didn't protect you. It trained them to devalue you. Because when you always give, people forget that you can say no. When you always agree, people assume you don't have a self. And when you always smile, they don't see the pain you've buried just to keep them comfortable. That's the hidden cost of being nice. You slowly start to disappear in your own life. You stop trusting your instincts. You second-guess everything. You start making yourself smaller and smaller until one day you look in the mirror and don't recognize who you become. That's not drama. That's psychological erosion. And it's happening to millions of people every single day, especially the ones who were raised to equate self-worth with being good. You were probably taught that being good means staying quiet, following rules, avoiding conflict, and making everyone happy. But Jung would tell you this: being good is not the same as being whole. Wholeness includes your anger, your sadness, your needs, your no. Wholeness requires you to be fully you, not just the digestible, likable, convenient parts. But when you've built your identity on being nice, reclaiming your wholeness feels dangerous. It feels selfish to say no. It feels mean to walk away. It feels scary to finally speak up. But that fear is not truth. It's conditioning. And you have to break it. Because if you don't, you will keep paying the price. Emotionally, mentally, physically, you'll carry the stress in your body. You'll feel drained after every conversation. You'll struggle to sleep. You'll start to feel anxious for no reason. That's your unconscious screaming for authenticity. The longer you ignore it, the louder it gets. Until one day, the mask cracks. Maybe you explode. Maybe you shut down. Maybe you walk away from everything just to feel alive again. That's the breaking point. And while it feels terrifying, it's also a gift. Because now you have a choice. Go back to performing or finally learn how to be real. That starts with one powerful, terrifying, liberating step. Stop being nice. Start being honest. Honest about what you feel. Honest about what you want. Honest about what you will and won't accept. That kind of honesty, it's not loud. It doesn't always look brave. Sometimes it looks like saying, I'm not okay with this. I need space. I don't agree. No, one word, one sentence. That's all it takes to start reclaiming your power. But you have to be ready for what comes next. Because the moment you stop being nice, people will get uncomfortable. They'll say, you've changed. They'll accuse you of being cold, selfish, even toxic. Let them. Because the people who are truly for you will never be threatened by your truth. They'll be relieved by it. They'll respect your boundaries. They'll meet you in your honesty. They'll love the whole you, not just the easy version. But first, you have to meet that version of yourself. The one who stops apologizing for existing. The one who stops negotiating their worth. The one who knows that authenticity will always offend the people who benefit from your silence. So let them be offended. Let them go. Because on the other side of nice is real connection. Not the kind built on performance, but the kind built on mutual respect. It's rare, but it's worth everything. And it only becomes possible the moment you stop trying to be liked and start telling the truth. That's what Carl Jung meant when he said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Because once you accept yourself, you can no longer tolerate relationships where you have to hide. That's the true cost of being nice. It keeps you stuck in a life that's not yours. And the moment you're ready to give that up, you begin to live. You don't need to raise your voice to be powerful. You don't need to beg to be respected. You don't need to convince people to treat you better. You just need one thing: boundaries, not walls, not defenses, boundaries. The quiet declaration, this is where I end and you begin. This is what I accept and this is what I won't. This is my line and I don't need to explain it to you. Most people misunderstand boundaries. They think they're confrontational, aggressive, rude. But here's the truth. Boundaries are not an attack. They're a mirror. They reflect back to others. This is who I am. Can you meet me here or not? And that reflection, it's uncomfortable. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because you're finally doing something right. See, when you have no boundaries, people don't get the real you. They get the you who's constantly adjusting, accommodating, shrinking. You think you're being kind, but what you're actually being is unavailable. Unavailable for real intimacy, real trust, real connection. Why? Because real connection requires friction. It requires you to say, that doesn't feel right. It requires you to be honest when something crosses the line. And that honesty, it separates the ones who love you from the ones who just use you. That's why boundaries are terrifying, because they filter your life. They reveal what's real and expose what isn't. The moment you stop saying yes to everything, you find out who is only there for the benefits of you, not the truth of you. They leave, they guilt trip, they push back. But what they're really saying is, your silence served me, your boundaries don't. And that's when you learn something life-changing. Power isn't about domination. It's about non-negotiation, not in a harsh, arrogant way, but in a grounded, unshakable way. The kind of power that doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't explain itself over and over just to be understood. It simply says, this is what I will allow in my life. And then it stands still. That's the real strength behind boundaries. They don't need to be loud to be effective. A person with strong boundaries doesn't need to defend them with arguments or threats. They embody them. You feel it in their presence. Their energy says, don't test me, without a single word. Because when someone with self-respect draws a line, they mean it, not to punish, but to protect. And the people who are safe, respectful, and emotionally mature, they welcome those lines. They don't take them personally because they have their own. They don't try to negotiate your limits because they understand that real love doesn't require self-abandonment. But people who thrive on your compliance, they'll call you selfish, difficult, cold, because now they have to do something they never had to do before, earn their access. And to people who are used to entitlement, earned access feels like rejection. Let them feel it, because your life isn't a public sidewalk. It's not open 24/7 to everyone who knocks. Your time, your energy, your emotional presence, it's sacred. And sacred things aren't handed out on demand. They're shared by invitation. That's what a boundary is: a gate, not a wall; a choice, not a punishment; a filter, not a weapon. And yet so many people avoid setting them. Why? Because boundaries come with consequences. They will cost you people, but they'll return you to yourself. They'll cost you comfort, but they'll give you clarity. They'll cost you approval, but they'll earn you self-respect. That trade-off, it's brutal at first, but it's necessary if you ever want to stop bleeding energy into people who never deserve your presence in the first place. Here's what most don't realize. A boundary is a declaration of your worth without needing anyone else to validate it. When you set a boundary, you're not waiting for someone to understand it. You're not needing them to like it. You're simply stating, this is what I need to be in integrity with myself. That's where true power lives. Because real power doesn't try to control others. It controls your access to you. And when you master that, you stop being reactive. You stop explaining your choices. You stop apologizing for protecting your peace. Because you realize you're not responsible for other people's comfort. You're responsible for your own integrity. And integrity is expensive. It will cost you the approval of people who are comfortable with your lack of boundaries. It will cost you the illusion of being the nice one, the easy one, the one who always says yes. But that's a good thing, because that version of you wasn't respected. They were convenient. And the moment you start respecting yourself, you become inconvenient to the people who benefited from your silence. Let them be uncomfortable, because their discomfort isn't your burden. It's their invitation to grow, just like you did. And if they can't grow with you, let them go. Because every time you enforce a boundary, you're not pushing people away. You're raising the standard for who gets to be close to you. That's not arrogance. That's discernment. And without discernment, you end up letting in everyone good, bad, manipulative, respectful, toxic, aligned, misaligned. You become available to chaos. Boundaries remove the chaos. They create order, structure, safety, not just for you, but for everyone who enters your life. Because here's the paradox. Boundaries don't distance real connection. They create it. Why? Because when people know your limits, they feel safer around you. They trust that you won't explode with hidden resentment. They trust that when you say yes, you actually mean it. They trust your no because it's rooted in truth, not guilt. That's emotional maturity. That's psychological safety. And that's what real relationships require. So no, you don't need to explain your boundaries to everyone. You don't need to justify them. You don't even need to make them palatable. You just need to live by them. And when someone crosses them, you don't argue. You don't plead. You enforce, calmly, consistently, with no drama. Because boundaries aren't about controlling others. They're about regulating you. They're not about changing people. They're about choosing what you allow into your life. And when you master that, you stop reacting. You start responding. You stop over-explaining. You start observing. You stop fearing rejection. You start recognizing red flags before they get close enough to wound you. This is what Carl Jung meant when he spoke of individuation, becoming whole, becoming integrated, becoming yourself fully. And that can't happen in a life without boundaries. Because a boundaryless life is a life without self-definition. If you want to evolve, if you want to live in truth, if you want to be respected, not just liked, you must stop negotiating your limits just to maintain peace. Because any peace that costs your self-respect isn't peace, it's suppression. And that always comes with a bill. So what do? You stop fearing the discomfort of saying no. You stop carrying the emotional weight of others. You stop asking for permission to protect your own nervous system. And you start embodying a quiet, grounded truth. I will not abandon myself to keep you comfortable. Say it again. I will not abandon myself to keep you comfortable. Let that become your mantra. Let it root into your nervous system. Let it become your new definition of love, not sacrifice, but truth, not convenience, but courage. That's the kind of power no one can take from you. Not because you shouted, not because you fought, but because you remembered who you are and what you deserve. And you made a choice to protect it with silence, with strength, with boundaries. You've been lied to your entire life, and it wasn't loud. It wasn't obvious. It was subtle, like a whisper that slowly rewired your soul. You were taught to be lovable, to be easy, agreeable, forgiving, to always smile, to never be too much, to please, to perform, to prove. Somewhere along the way, love became a performance, and you became the stage. But here's the brutal truth. The more you chase love, the more you erase yourself. Because the second you need love from others to feel worthy, you give away the one thing you can't afford to lose, your self-respect. And without self-respect, you'll let people treat you like an option. You'll stay in places you've outgrown. You'll tolerate apologies without change, attention without intention, and intimacy without commitment. You'll accept crumbs because you've convinced yourself you don't deserve the full meal. But you do. And it starts with this shift. Stop chasing love. Start earning respect. Because love without respect, it's manipulation. It's, I care about you, but only when you behave how I want. It's, I love you, but I won't change for you. It's, I'll be close to you, but only when it's convenient. Love without respect is the most dangerous kind because it looks warm, but it burns you slowly. It drains you while smiling in your face. It wraps itself in romantic language while crossing every emotional line. And you tolerate it because deep down, you don't believe you're worth more. This is where the transformation begins. Because respect isn't about being liked. Respect is about being recognized. Recognized for your values. Recognized for your boundaries. Recognized for the standard you live by. When you stop chasing love, you start standing in that standard. You stop needing validation. You start demanding alignment. You stop asking, do you love me? And start asking, do you honor me? Because love is an emotion, fleeting, reactive, and often unconscious. But respect is a decision. It's earned, it's maintained, and it's measurable in action. The people who truly respect you, they won't play with your time. They won't manipulate your emotions. They won't disappear when things get hard or guilt you when you speak your truth. They'll rise to meet your energy or quietly step aside when they realize they can't. And you won't have to force it. That's what changes when you stop chasing. You stop selling your soul for connection. You stop overextending just to feel chosen. You stop betraying yourself to avoid being alone. Because here's what nobody tells you. Being loved by someone who doesn't respect you isn't love, it's self-abandonment. It's choosing fantasy over reality. It's letting the dream of potential silence the scream of your intuition. But respect wakes you up. It doesn't flatter you with empty words. It honors you with consistent action. And when you start to live from that truth, everything shifts. You walk differently. You speak more slowly. You choose more carefully. You stop oversharing to be liked. You stop overgiving to be needed. You stop over-apologizing for simply existing. Because you realize, I don't need to be loved by everyone. I need to be respected by myself. That's where self-respect begins. Not with a speech, not with a confrontation, but with a quiet decision. I will no longer betray myself in the name of love. Say it again. I will no longer betray myself in the name of love. That means you stop waiting for closure. You stop accepting inconsistent behavior. You stop calling it loyalty when it's really just fear of being alone. You stop asking, how do they feel about me? And start asking, how do I feel when I'm around them? That's the pivot. That's the power. Because chasing love puts your emotional safety in someone else's hands. But earning respect puts it back in yours. And once you've tasted self-respect, once you've looked in the mirror and not flinched, you'll never trade it again. Not for comfort, not for chemistry, not for promises. Because you know what love without respect costs now. And it costs everything. This isn't about becoming cold. It's about becoming clear. Clear about who you are. Clear about what you value. Clear about what you will and will not tolerate. Because the more you clarify your values, the less you'll chase illusions. You'll see through the charm. You'll sense the subtle disrespect. You'll catch the moment someone wants access without accountability. And you won't argue. You won't beg. You won't explain. You'll just exit with dignity. Because people who respect themselves don't fight for space where they're not respected. They don't negotiate their worth. They don't lower the bar just to avoid loneliness. They raise it, and trust that those meant to stay will rise with it. Let's be real, chasing love is addicting. It feeds your ego, it gives you a temporary high, but it always ends the same way, with you empty, confused, and resentful. Because what you were really chasing wasn't love, it was belonging. But you'll never find belonging in places that require you to shrink. True belonging doesn't ask you to earn your place by being less. It honors you for being fully yourself. And that starts when you stop chasing what was never real and start earning something that lasts. Respect. So how do you do it? How do you stop chasing and start respecting yourself? You start with standards, not preferences. Standards. You don't just say, I want someone who communicates. You say, I don't allow inconsistency. Period. You don't just say, I want someone emotionally mature. You say, I will not entertain emotional chaos. You don't just say, I want to be chosen. You say, I refuse to beg for what should be freely given. And then, here's the key, you enforce it. Not with drama, not with ultimatums, with distance. Because nothing screams self-respect louder than silence after a boundary has been crossed. And that silence, that absence, it will reveal everything. If they respect you, they'll return differently. If they don't, they'll blame you for disappearing. Let them, because your job isn't to fix their perception of you. Your job is to protect your peace. And sometimes, peace means walking away, even when it hurts, even when it's confusing, even when your heart is still attached. Why? Because the longer you stay where you're not respected, the more disconnected you become from your own power. And power is the one thing you cannot afford to give away. Here's the bottom line. Stop asking if they love you. Start asking if they respect you. Because the one who truly respects you, they'll show up when it's hard. They'll listen when you say no. They'll adjust without being forced. And most importantly, they'll never ask you to trade your integrity for their comfort. That's not just love. That's alignment. That's not just connection. That's truth. And truth is the only thing that can hold a relationship together when the honeymoon fades, when the chaos hits, when the real work begins. So stop begging to be loved. Start becoming someone who refuses to be disrespected. Not because you're better, but because you finally know your value. And once you know your value, you'll stop chasing anything that makes you forget it. You don't need to fight for respect. You don't need to beg for it. You don't need to over-explain, overshare, or overperform. Because real respect doesn't come from doing more. It comes from being real, especially when it's uncomfortable. The truth is, most people aren't disrespected by others. They're disrespected by themselves first. They betray their own needs. They silence their own voice. They hide their truth behind politeness, humor, productivity, or humility. And then they wonder why no one sees them. But how can the world respect what you refuse to show? You can't hide and be respected at the same time. Respect begins the moment you stop negotiating with your own truth. Not when you finally prove your worth. Not when someone finally validates your pain. Not when you get the apology, the recognition, or the love you've been waiting for. It starts much earlier than that. It starts the moment you stop hiding. The moment you stop diluting your truth just to avoid conflict. The moment you stop performing a version of yourself just to feel accepted. Because the second you stop betraying yourself just to belong, that's when you start belonging to yourself. And once you belong to yourself, you stop chasing respect. You become it. You want to know if you're living authentically? Look at what you tolerate. Look at how you let people speak to you. Look at the boundaries you enforce, or the ones you keep letting slide. Look at the silence you keep. Look at the mask you still wear, even when it burns. Respect isn't about being fearless. It's about choosing honesty over comfort, even when your voice shakes, even when people walk away, even when it costs you something. Because the deeper truth is, if it doesn't cost you anything, it's not real self-respect. It's just performance, and maybe you're scared. Scared to take the mask off, scared to speak your truth, scared to be seen. But I'll tell you this, the version of you that's hiding, that's not the full story. That's just the draft. The real you, the one who doesn't beg, doesn't chase, doesn't shrink, is buried beneath the noise, and they've been waiting, patiently, quietly, for you to stop pretending, for you to stop apologizing, for you to stop hiding behind what's easy and start living what's real. Oh, here's the final truth. The world will mirror the relationship you have with yourself. Disrespect will stop the moment you stop allowing it. Authenticity will magnetize what your mask never could. And respect you've been craving from others, it will flood in once you give it to yourself first. No more masks. No more shrinking. No more waiting. You want respect? Earn it in the mirror, and the world will follow.